And hello, fellow gamers. I am back again playing more Videotastic Thingos. This time I'm playing Color a Dinosaur on the NES. Widely regarded as one of the worst games ever made for the system. I have actually never played this game myself. It's just sat on my stack of unplayed games for a couple of years now, so that's what makes this a Jeremy Tries, so let's go ahead and go. Now, it's my understanding that in this game called Color a Dinosaur, you color a dinosaur. Sherlock Holmes would be proud. So I'm guessing here I'm just going to pick which design I want to color. Might as well go with this one. It's first. So, wait a minute. Okay, I'm pushing... Okay, so you can't really move the pointer wherever you want, because I'm moving on the D-pad here. And it's taking me to pre-designated coloring areas. So, part of me says that's a little convenient, part of me says that's kind of restrictive. So, the select changes the things on the side. I think. It also changes the background color. X-ray dinosaur. Okay, so... Okay, A fills in. Oh, B changes the color or the pattern. It's kind of a weird way it's filling those in, but okay, it works. I think we may have already seen all of the gameplay. Oh, okay. So, the palette that it's using is literally only the ones that you can see on the side. Like, I filled in its hind right leg with a color already, but that corresponds to a flashing color on this particular palette, so it went ahead and started flashing. That's actually pretty fast and efficient to color that in. Huh. Hey, Jormware's joined us. Jormware says Oddman likes giraffes. And Gevorg Marashlian has also joined us. Welcome. He says, what up? I'm coloring dinosaurs, apparently. Wait a minute, why is that segment like that? There's like one there and one there. Are its scale fingers, are they wilting? What's going on here? Ugh. These color patterns are hideous. Wait, did you see how it filled it in right there? Like it fills it in with a solid color first and then does the pattern. That's weird. Why does it do that? Gilligan says, yeah, color that Stegosaurus. Color the shit out of it. And we've been joined by Jordan Roby. Welcome, who says, hello, everybody. Hello, Jordan. And he says, yeah, speedrun this bitch. How would you speedrun this game? I'm sure there's some way. Maybe fill in all the dinosaur patterns first? Or like fill them all in back to back or something? I don't think there's really any scorekeeping to be had though, so really... Like the only way you would know that it was actually speedrun is if you watched a video of somebody doing it. You know, someone should do that. Just to be insane. Okay, some of the bigger sections take a while. Gilligan says, oh, this is the same color you colored the last Stegosaurus. Am I boring you already? Gavorg Marashland says, I see you didn't want to deal with or face the horror of Rusty Bucket Bay engine room. Actually, I would have, but this particular stream started much later than usual because I was doing stuff. So I wanted to pick something that I knew probably wouldn't be that long of a stream. While we're waiting for this to fill in, I can keep looking at the chat. Chris Morse says that the spikes on the Stegosaurus' back are folded over. Gilgat says that the Stegosaurus was captive for so long his fins started to collapse. Or perhaps he's just really old and he needs some Finagra or something. Gavorg Marashland's getting into it. He says, cool, color that dinosaur. Jay suggests a tool-assisted speedrun. He also suggests that what I was doing when I said I was doing stuff was watching porn. No, actually, I was doing something much more fun. So now I have bricked this Stegosaurus. It'll never boot up again. Chris Moore says, need to refine that edge. More like refine the game. Oh my god. That palette change just, well, that's seizure mode. Blind Reflex, who has joined us, welcome, says, LOL at game, is this better than Mario Paint? Probably if you're on acid. This is, of course, you know, this is probably the best game ever if you're on acid. Or maybe worst, depending on, you know, what kind of acid you're on. How do I color its butt? There's the butt. I guess that's a good color for that. Gilgas says, and watching porn equals Animal Planet. Nobody's supposed to know about my bestiality fetish. That's why I was playing this game in the first place. Okay, so I guess I'm kind of bored of this. Push start, and okay, good, that does take me back here. What the fuck is this thing? Oh, wait a minute, I know what it is. It's a Turkeysaurus Rex. Gilgas says, of when it started flashing, he says, Jesus, it's like you're actively trying to give us all seizures. And Jay also says, I was just going to say this game is a good activity for drugs. And Lucas Waters has joined us. Welcome. Gilgas says, all games are a good activity for drugs. They're also good for training you to kill people, apparently. At least that's what you think whenever you're a person that doesn't know anything about video games. And you want to ruin the fun for other people. Lucas Water says, dab, shatter. Is that some kind of lingo that the kids are saying these days? He's got blue eyes. It goes blue first and then it gets cancer. Jay says Jeremy likes the geese. Shh. Gilligan says that in response to Jay, who said Jeremy likes the geese, Gilligan says only because they have long necks. Blind Reflex says this is retarded Ducky from Land Before Time. I'll say retarded. And now he's definitely having an acid trip because his eyes are blinking. Jay's offering us a public service announcement. He says, if someone asks you to dab, just say no. Chris Moore says, actually, it seems like many people that play video games think of themselves as trained military. I know, right? All you need is to play Call of Duty and get you some camouflage pants and some big tires for your car, and that's pretty much the same thing as military training, right? What's that little thing right there? It's supposed to be his tooth? Well, that's got to be radioactive. Lucas Water says, we're the retarded-looking turkey, and I'm making it more retarded. Gilga says, I'm an expert in firearms because I played Calls of Duties. Well, you also have one, and you have taken the courses and the training, so, you know. Sometimes Killigos likes to show me his pistol. Then he asks me to use a condom this time. Chris Moore says he's been a pro race car driver since Gran Turismo 2. Yeah. Because it's exactly the same thing. Ha! Jay says, I for one am completely trained for a demonic invasion of Phobos. And I'm right there with you, Jay. What's the first thing I run on any new computer I get? Doom. Speaking of which, I did get a couple of new old computers today, as if I don't have enough already. They were at a thrift store, and one of them was $10, one of them was $15, and the thrift store was having a half-off sale today, so I got the both of them for about $13. One of them is an HP Vectra Pentium 120, and the other one is a something. It's like a P4 or something or other, but it has what looks like a CCTV capture card in it, which I thought was interesting, and possibly a Radeon video card that might go into my DOS gaming console instead of the one I'd decided on. Let's try this one. Lucas Water says, fuck Call of Duty, I love the good games. I actually cannot speak for Call of Duty because I've never played them. The increasing trend in realism in first-person shooters and video games in general just has never really interested me. Give this one some latently homosexual toenails. Chris Moore says, Doom LAN party on a 486. Hell yes, dude. That's where it's at. Gilligan says, bro, Call of Duty is the only game that innovates and updates itself to keep up with the times. Which that's how he would have said it if he'd been here. Jay says, I'm disappointed the dinosaurs you color aren't colored on the main screen. Stupid NES hardware limitations. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, actually. I'm actually surprised that this game even exists on the NES because of hardware limitations. Like, say, for example, due to a maximum number of sprites per scan line, maximum number of sprites on the screen, etc. Because you see that whenever it's filling these in. is doing it boxes at a time like that, and then it does all the chunks around the edge that aren't boxes. Because each one of those has to be a sprite. And yet it's not flickering or anything at all. So from a technical perspective, it's actually somewhat impressive. I have the idea, or I have the theory that this probably started out as like a tech demo or a programming exercise for somebody. And then they decided to make it into a game. Lucas Water says, you never played Call of Duty, Jeremy? Holy, I can't believe that. And yes, there was no word in there. But yeah, the Call of Duty started what, around the PS2 GameCube and Xbox generation, didn't they? He's got the brownish, orangish, reddish eye thing. And now he's got disco feet. Lucas Water says, what's a 486? It is a computer that was top of the line in the mid-90s. The HP Vectra that I got today, which I said is a Pentium 120, is about a year or two after the last 486 rolled off the line. Well, maybe not the last one, but, you know, when the Pentium 1 basically became popular, or started to become popular. That was a couple of years after the 486 was popular. 486, of course, referring to the main CPU in the PC. That's how to give people seizures. Jay says he hasn't played Call of Duty either. That means we're both untainted. Oh my god, that's hideous to encode. That right there is a stream test right there. I should record that and play that during the testing phase of my stream. And if it can encode this and upload it without friggin' dying, then it's in pretty good shape. Also makes the camera go apeshit, because it doesn't have any resources left over to do the camera properly. There, that's better. Lucas Water says, you can be the next Picasso or Van Gogh. Jay says, more like Bob Ross. Yeah, if you're comparing like raw speed, then you're definitely right on. Right on. But yeah, he could do it. Bob Ross must have made painters absolutely sick, because he could do a professional, awesome-looking painting in like 20 minutes. He said himself, though, that that's just because he knew the techniques, he knew the tricks. And of course, he made it a point to tell the tricks to the viewers. Okay, that was weird. It didn't fully fill that in. That's weird. It's not... It's doing a little more each time? Well, it almost got it. Jay says, impersonating Bob Ross, he says, happy little toenails. Chris Moore says, I was about fifth or sixth grade when I traded for one. A 486 PC, perhaps? Lucas Water says, my first PC was a Windows 2000 IBM. It's not a bad computer. I would like to have lots more true blue IBM PCs myself. I already have a lot, but not enough because I don't have them all. Lucas Water says vape. Hang on, I'll use all my vaping stuff that I have. Okay, I'm done. Jay says, in reference to me using that as a test encoding thing, he says, screw the SMPTE color bars test. My scaler, my DVDO Edge, actually has that test pattern built into it. It has a buttload of test patterns built into it. Jay says, the Bob Ross was so fucking zen, too. I watch him if I need to relax. Me, too. And you know what he did before he was a painter? He was in the Air Force. And he himself said that while he was in there, he spent most of his time screaming at the lower rank people that were underneath him. And I just can't envision him screaming for any reason at all. But I guess he got all of his screaming out while he was in the military, because when he painted, he was the most chill dude on the planet. Lucas Waters says, have you ever seen Gangs of New York? I have not, but I've heard good things. Holy crap. Huh. Chris Morris said he had indeed traded a 486 for a Mexican Stratocaster to my friend's dad. So that means you had the Mexican Stratocaster, which I'm guessing is like a fake knockoff thing. So basically, you got a cool computer and the dude got shit. Chris Moore says that, yeah, the guy maintained a network at a hospital and had plenty of parts. Had that land for Doom. Lucas Water says the pic is very blurry and it's on HD. That's because, number one, there's a deceptively large amount going on right now. Because this is actually, number one, because of the fine detail in this is actually kind of hard for my encoder to encode. So that's why it's coming through looking like it's on an old TV, you know, with the static coming through an antenna. And also because I'm broadcasting at 2 megabits instead of my usual 4 megabits. Which means it's got half the usual bandwidth to work with. Okay, Chris Moore says that the Mexican Stratocaster, says it's the entry level for a real Fender, probably worth $300 at the time, and still. Chris Moore also says he had that land for Doom in the garage. I did feel ripped as computers did while they did. That's weird. But wish I still had it now. They're making a comeback, yeah. Yeah, they're, jeez. I'm just remembering all the computers that I had back at the time, too. And at one point, my parents made me throw away a bunch of computers that I had because by their justification, I wasn't using them. They were just sitting in the garage. But yeah, there was lots of computers I really didn't want to get rid of at the time, and I've slowly bought back most of those computers. They're not the originals, though, so it's not quite the same, but I'll never get those computers back again, so the closest thing I can have is another iteration of the same model, which I do. and even better than what I had at the time. Like one of the computers that I threw away at the time was an Apple IIe, and now well, not now, but a couple of years back, I bought another of that exact same model of the Apple IIe, and then I decked it out with like every accessory I could get on it. So not only did I have back sort of the IIe that I threw away once upon a time, but now my IIe is better than the one that I had at the time. Still wish I had the original one back, but I'll go with that one. Jay says, I don't really understand the boom in interest in old computers, but I like it. Yeah, I don't get it either, but it is cool. I mean, I think probably Mr. Regular of Regular Car Reviews, like something he said in one of his videos is a phrase that keeps popping into my head, which is, what did he call it? Like, culture is a snake eating its own tail, which is to say everything old is new again. And so it's like once something old hits a particular threshold of years or something, then people get into it again and it comes back again and then it goes away again. And that cycle keeps happening over and over and over. So now it's old computers and old video games, which I like. So I'm like, hey, you know, sort of interesting to some people now. And then a couple of years will pass and they'll go back to thinking of me as a nerd again, and I'll be like, fine, that's just more stuff that you're not buying that I can buy. Yeah, Jay says, I understand why I'm interested in old computers, but there seems to be a lot of people these days, and I don't know if it's the same reason. I think you're right, and I know exactly what you mean. There's the people that get interested in stuff like that because it's the new fad. And so they'll get like hyper interested in it and dump a ton of money on it in a really short period of time. But once other people get disinterested in it, then those are the people that get out of the interest the quickest, and they sell off all their stuff the quickest. And there's always that group of people that comes and goes with any fad. And the nice guy part of me wants to think that they're not just doing it because they're posing, but because they're trying out new things and trying to figure out what they like. But the asshole in me just wants to say that they're posers. Ah, that's a good idea. Chris Moore says, I want to go around and offer a free attic clean out, but I get to keep all the old goodies. Yeah. Why not, man? But you can find a ton of cool stuff that way. And Jay says, maybe computers really are just like cars. It is, yeah. In all of the regular car reviews that I've watched, even though that I'm not really that into cars, a lot of the enthusiasm, the fundamental underlying enthusiasm between the two hobbies is exactly the same. And so I can understand a lot about what they're coming from. Now, I'm glad I'm not into collecting cars because, damn, that's got to be an expensive hobby. And a space-consuming hobby, too. I mean, the most that I've dropped on any single old computer was $625, and that was my Amiga 4000. But I mean, to get a car for $625, it's nothing collectible, and it's got to be a total piece of shit, and it's probably broken and doesn't work, and yeah. So I feel sorry for the collector people that are into old cars because they must be starving. But I guess the flip side of that is probably what they do is they don't do what I do, which is to buy a ton of different computers. They'll instead buy like one car and then spend all their time and effort in restoring it and building it back up and, turn it into a project. Whereas, like the computers I bought today for $13, I'll probably play with each of them for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then they'll go on the stack and I'll never touch them again. Yeah, Chris Moore says all the badass 80s shredder guitars cost thousands now that all the old metalheads are engineers and can hoard them. That's number one thing driving prices up of old video games, too. It's people just hoarding them. Like me. Except there's a difference between me and some of the hoarders, and that is I'm not hoarding mine with hoping that the price is going to go up so I can resell it and make money. That's never the goal for me. I buy things that I want because I like them. Like if I got a brand new sealed copy of Stadium Events for the NES, you know what I would do with it? I would open it and I would play it. Jay says, I used to hate ugly beige boxes and now they make me giddy. Me too. Because in the thrift stores that I usually go to here locally, they don't have a lot in the way of computers to begin with. They have some parts now and then. They usually have monitors and keyboards and stuff like that. Very rarely do they have like a full computer. And it's usually something really, really common, like Dell's from like maybe 10 years ago or so. And I know probably everybody in here has seen one of those at some point in time because they were so popular. And people are always dumping those on the thrift stores because they're everywhere. There's tons of them. And so it's very rare that I actually see something older than that because those computers are typically of like the Pentium 4 era. And I'm not interested in much past the Pentium 3. And so for me to have found that HP Vectra was, I didn't exactly get weak in the knees, but I got pretty happy. And I actually, I saw it in the thrift store yesterday, and like I said, it was $10, and at the time I just couldn't justify it. Because I was like, I don't really need this, and $10 is kind of more than I want to spend on something that I'm going to just play for a few minutes and then it's going to take up space. But today, that same thrift store was having the half-off sale, and so I was like, well, maybe $5 is a little easier to justify, so I went back and got it. And then they had the other tower that I mentioned, which wasn't there yesterday, it was just there today. And so I was like, well, I'm already spending $5, why not spend $7 more? Chris Moore says, people hold on to things they grow up liking, like me, but most have to wait until they can afford them, which time most have disappeared and the remaining are fought over. Pretty much, and that's exactly what drives the price up. Lucas Water says, will you start Super Mario 64 soon, Jeremy? I will, once I finish off at least one more of my Jeremy Plays series that are in progress, because I've got like a half a dozen different games or so that I'm playing through in multiple chunks. I would like to at least finish one of those before I start another one, because I don't like to start too many projects simultaneously. Oh, interesting. Lucas Water says, I'm an auto body repair and restoration mechanic and fix up some crazy expensive cars for people. And that's interesting because that's what my brother does, actually. He likes it quite a bit. I actually thought of going into computer repair once upon a time. Even tried to get into it. but the place at the time was a bunch of dicks. So, yeah. I mean, it was a cool place to buy things, but the interview was retarded. Basically, what it boiled down to was I wasn't pretty enough to work there. Because the guy looked at me, and I guess I hadn't shaved as closely as he would have preferred. He didn't directly say that that's what it was. He didn't even directly say, you're not getting this job because of your appearance. What he said was, at the time, my job was in a grocery store, which he knew. I put that on the application. And he said, well, you know, you're working at the grocery store, and one of your jobs may be to face up the shelves, which is, you know, go down the aisles and make them look nice. Take all the products and stuff and pull them to the front of the shelf so it doesn't look like a complete disarray of shit. And so I said, yeah, and I know about that procedure. And he said something like, so how could I hire a person that doesn't even face themselves up? And I'm like, okay. At the time, I thought he was speaking hypothetically because he wasn't directing his statements directly at me. And so I agreed with him. I'm like, well, yeah, that's your choice to make. I mean, you're the boss. This is your business. And if you don't want to hire someone that's like caked in mud or something, then that is your choice to make. And then after I left, I figured out he was passively talking about me. But you know what? If I had gotten that job, then that might have ended up being like a high-pressure sales job, which is what it was. It was a sales job. It was selling parts, not fixing computers. I could have maybe moved into their service department, but the job I had applied for, which is the only one they had open, was for sales. And so I've done sales before, and it fucking sucks. So I think it may have been a good thing I didn't get that job. Chris Moore says, I think in reference to me saying how cars must be a very space-consuming hobby. He says, man, you aren't joking. My mom wants my LS400 out of her driveway, and another friend wants her carport back that my Miata currently lives in. Yeah. Jay also makes a point that is one of the main reasons I do a lot of the collecting of hardware and video games that I do. He says, there are a lot of things I didn't have growing up or I wasn't around for when they were around that I'm only now able to get and enjoy. And that's like the reason I have probably 75% of the stuff that I have gone out of my way to go looking for to buy. That's like the reason why I have most of it. Is because like Amigas. The only Amiga I ever saw growing up was used as the editing computer for the video production class at my high school. And so I never got to play games on an Amiga. I didn't know anyone that had an Amiga. I never really got to play with it. I got to use that computer, but only for the stuff for the class. So I didn't really get to mess with it and have any fun with it. And so I eventually remembered Amigas. Look at that, he's got cancer. Eventually remembered them and got into them and was really glad I did. They're really fun, cool computers. Oh, Chris Moore says, I hated as Japanese cars got big after the Fast and Furious. All my favorites are disappearing. Yeah. Yeah, Fast and Furious. I often kind of wonder what, like, real, true car enthusiasts that are really into cars, not because they look cool and not to show them off, but because it's just something they're really into. I wonder what those kind of enthusiasts think of the Fast and the Furious movies. Like, if they made a similarly themed movie, but it was like about computers and glamorizing the aesthetics of computers and showing like some overly hot, scantily clad chick playing the latest Call of Duty on, say, a fully decked out Alienware PC. If they did a movie about that, I would frankly kind of be insulted by it. But there are people in, this community of people that are into computers that are into it for that reason. And so they would look at those movies and say, oh, well, that's a freaking awesome movie. What's wrong with you? Well, I have a personality. That's what's wrong with me. I have an identity. Chris Moore says, I think most people do it, collecting cars, I think he means, because they like them, but it's always better when fewer people like things, less competition. Yeah, I know. That's me. That's more for us. Chris Moores also makes another good point. He says, nobody repairs anything anymore. And that's something, over the past few months, actually, I realized, I've known for quite some time that we've become an increasingly disposable society. But it wasn't until just a few months ago that I realized how much I myself was buying into that mentality. And so I decided to do something about that. And now, whenever I have something that has a problem, I don't throw it away and buy a new one. I at least see if I can fix it first. And not that I ever did immediately throw it away and buy a new one. If it was something like a software fix in a computer or something, then, I'd Google it and see if I could fix it myself for free and with, maybe not that much effort. But if it was something like say, I had a Macintosh motherboard that was misbehaving because some of the capacitors had gone bad in it. Previously, I wouldn't throw that motherboard away. I'd maybe stick it in a closet somewhere, and then I'd look on eBay and try and find a working replacement and then just buy a new one. Whereas now, I look at it from the perspective of maybe I can repair this. Maybe I can replace these capacitors. Maybe I have an almost perfectly working board here already, and with a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, I can bring it back to perfect working order and not have to spend out comparatively a lot more money and more time to wait for another one to get here. So I've been actively trying to adjust that thinking in my own head, and I'm thinking that the rest of society could probably benefit from that kind of thinking too. Lucas Waters says, can you make a green and blue dinosaur to look like my iguana? Sure, let's do this one. Well, I'm guessing your iguana doesn't look this retarded, but let's see. Were there any greens in these palettes? Because they all seem to have like blue and orange and puce. Is your iguana radioactive? Because I can color it that. Jay says he had one of those interviews similarly to the one where I interviewed at the computer shop. He says, I had an interview at a small electronics retailer, and the owner took great care to explain to me how I wasn't the right caliber employee for the store. What a penis. He says, in retrospect, I'm surprised I sat through what seemed like a half hour of this, because obviously he was wasting both our times. Yeah. The only reason I can think of was he like in his head, was he getting off on putting you down? Chris Moore says, I was lucky and worked for a backwoods security installation and learned about electronics. Most just put up wireless and replace when it acts up. No troubleshooting. Yeah. And that is the mentality these days. Which is unfortunate. Because what happens to that stuff more often than not? It goes in the landfill. And most of that stuff shouldn't be going into the landfill. And, it is frustrating whenever, like I said, the Macintosh motherboard, if all it needs is just new capacitors, that means it's like 95% operational. And by just putting in, okay, it may take a few hours of your time, and it may be frustrating, especially if you're like me and you don't have any experience soldering, or at least not much. But capacitors are cheap. And so for just like a few hours of your time and possibly frustration and like $2 of capacitors, you could have something that's flaky or dead brought completely back to working order. And that's thoroughly appealing to me. Lucas Waters says, I fucking hate the Fast movies. So that is from the mouth of an auto enthusiast, so that answers my question. He says, I repair stuff, but a lot of people live in a disposable world. Yeah. Technology in particular is seen as very disposable. I mean, I think we have Apple to blame for that partially because they've managed to convince people that a $500 cell phone is disposable once a year. So, yeah. Jay says, things are so easy to fix, too. In the last 10 months, I fixed 2 LCD monitors that stopped working. And I remember you posting about one of those. It was having the problem where you like turn it on, and it would take like a half hour to fully warm up. And yeah, he swapped out some capacitors. That's all that was wrong with it. He says, new capacitor solves everything. I bet even cancer, possibly. Certainly technological cancer. Okay, Lucas Waters, your iguana looks like this now. Chris Moore says, my buddy does pro audio repair at studios around town. Say 99.9% it's the caps. They're electrolytic and will eventually dry out or crack. Eventually, indeed. Or in the case of Macintosh motherboards, and not that it's limited to Macintosh motherboards, but the most common problem with them is that the capacitors have not only died, but they started leaking out their fluids onto the motherboard, and that's now contacting traces that shouldn't be contacted and does all kinds of weird things. But most of the time, if you just replace the capacitors, number one, but then you clean off all the goop that came out of the capacitors, the traces aren't contacting anymore, and the board will perk right up. Thankfully, a lot of recent PC hardware is starting to use different capacitors, like tantalum capacitors. No, it's something even newer than that. But they're not going to like wear out and leak in like 20 or 30 years like electrolytic capacitors. Which means that stuff will stay working a lot longer. Lucas Water says, I wish I was better at fixing some electronics like phones and computers and things like that. The internet is quite an amazing tutor for those kinds of things. Like, for example, my first soldering project, believe it or not, I didn't do until just a couple of months ago. Of all the years of owning electronics and loving electronics, and computers specifically, I'd never actually soldered anything. But I got my Philips MSX2 computer, and it shipped from the factory with some known problems. Not just mine, but a lot of this particular model came out of the factory that way. And so that was my opportunity to learn soldering, because, the other option for me to get another one to replace it was to buy another one from Europe, and it was like $300 to get this one here. And the other one was likely going to have exactly the same problem because, like I said, it was a factory manufacturing defect. And so that's what pushed me towards the thinking of, well, maybe I can fix this. And so I just started searching for the symptoms I was hearing, which in this case was audio that was too quiet and sounded kind of crackly and grainy. I found the msx.org forums that way, and there's tons of helpful people on those forums, and I'm imagining that there's forums like this for all kinds of communities like this all over the internet. You can go there, and no matter how many times that someone else has come there with your exact same problem, they'll treat it as if it's never happened before, and they'll help you with it. And they'll link you to the specs, and they'll tell you some of the possible pitfalls. They'll walk you through taking these things apart and how to put them back together. And they're just as into this stuff as you are, and they want just as much to see it working as you do. And so, yeah, if you've got something like that you want to get working, just start Googling and see if you can find a community, and they'll help you fix it. They helped me fix my computer. Jay says that's actually a pretty rad-looking iguana. And Lucas Water says, are you almost done with Banjo yet? I have, let's see, there's Rusty Bucket Bay to do, and of course all 4 parts of Click Clock Wood, and what else? There's of course the Furnace Fun board game thing. Are there any other levels besides that? I feel like maybe there's one that I'm forgetting. Maybe. Jay says in response to my old diatribe about learning to repair things, he says, I'm literally an idiot. Everything I've learned off of YouTube. It's amazing what you can do when you're simply capable of following instructions. Indeed it is. Like another one of the things that pushed me towards repairing things instead of replacing them was there was a guy on YouTube. He is an independent repair guy. He repairs iPhones. And he repairs iPhones that have problems that Apple literally says are unrepairable. And he does it by his own admission. He had to go, since he is not an Apple authorized technician, he doesn't have access to the official Apple schematics. Because if he became an official Apple authorized repair technician, then Apple would make some of these iPhones that come in, he would make him tell the customer that they're not repairable. Even if he knows that they are, and even if he knows how to fix it, he would be forced to tell them it's unrepairable, you have to buy a new one. And so he's intentionally stayed independent through this process, but because he doesn't have access to the schematics, he has to go and find them in weird places on the internet, like Russian FTP servers and that kind of stuff. But because he's willing to do that, he's able to repair these phones for way less than it would cost to buy a new one. He's saving the customers money. They walk away with a working device. Having spent less money, they're happy. And he gets money in the bank, so he's happy. And that's one more cell phone that doesn't go into the landfill. So the Earth is happy. So basically, everybody but Apple wins. Not like they need the money anyway, though, right? And it's not just Apple, either. Like, any kind of highly integrated device like that is intentionally built to never easily be taken apart like that. That kind of mentality doesn't just come from Apple. It's coming from a lot of the technology manufacturers lately, especially manufacturers of tablets and cell phones, because that technology is moving so fast and it's being updated so often that they're kind of, they're encouraging the disposable mentality. So I don't want it to seem like I'm unloading on Apple here. I'm unloading on the disposable mentality and the companies that profit from it, of which Apple is one. Chris Morse makes a good point. He says to Jay, who said, I'm an idiot, he says, you may not be an idiot, but maybe you just weren't interested in what you were forced to learn. And I know what he means by that, because I wasn't interested in like soldering and replacing things like capacitors and resistors, you know, the diode level stuff, and until I had a problem that needed to be solved. And now I actually kind of am into that kind of stuff, low level circuit design and stuff. So sometimes it does take that initial push of a problem to get you interested in something. And then you're like, hey, this is actually kind of cool. And I expanded my hobbies and my mind at the same time. Jay says, yeah, I don't do very well with things I'm not interested in. Yeah, me neither. Like I'm not particularly into cars, so, but my dad and my brother are, so if something about it breaks, then they can fix it. But if I got the if I didn't have access to them, and I got the inclination that it was something that could be fixed for cheaper than I could get it fixed for at a mechanic, then I might actually attempt to fix it myself. And maybe that would get me interested in cars, I don't know. And Chris Morse also says, if you can understand the concepts that you learned and apply them the next time, you are doing great. Yeah, learn by doing. It's an incredibly powerful teaching tool. That's entirely how I learned C#, in fact. I didn't know any C# before I got my current job. I had no interest in learning C#. I was perfectly fine to keep trucking along with Visual Basic and PHP. And then I got my job, and there were projects there that were already written in C# that needed to be maintained. So it was a sink or swim kind of thing, and I swam. And I'm glad I did, because now it's my language of choice. Jay says, of disposing of cell phones, he said, I hadn't even thought of the point about landfills, and Apple considers themselves very green, too. And yeah, there's ways to recycle that stuff, of course, and I'm sure you know this, too. I'm sure everybody here knows this. But most people don't take advantage of that stuff. People are increasingly taking advantage of that stuff, especially when it's easy. Like at the entrance to Best Buy, there's bins that you can put your old cell phones into. If it's easy for people to do, then they will do it. But recycling in general is, what the fuck? Holding like a palm tree. But recycling in general, unfortunately, hasn't caught on as much as it should. And that's because it still isn't that easy. But people are starting to become more concerned with those kinds of things. People are starting to become more concerned with, things like batteries going into landfills. And so they're starting to think twice about, just chucking everything, which is good. I think we're gradually trending upwards as a species. Chris Moore says, this stuff definitely has life expectancy, true, but it's also what the consumers want. Nobody wants no old shit except us hoarders, yeah. That brings up another concept that I'm kind of angry about there, and that's the idea of planned obsolescence, so to speak. It's the idea that a manufacturer intentionally makes something that they know is not going to last, which I think is kind of shitty. Actually, not kind of shitty, it's thoroughly shitty. Which is probably why things are becoming increasingly disposable, because they're becoming increasingly shitty. So people are more inclined to throw them away when they break. That does mean things are cheaper, which is good. Cheaper price-wise, but it also means they're constructed more cheaply, which is not good. It's good for the companies that make the stuff because it means that they make more money. Lucas Water says, do you have a job, Jeremy? Yes, I do. I make software. I don't get to work on things that are particularly interesting to me, unfortunately, but it's a good job. It pays the bills. I've been doing it for going on 13 years, so it must not be that bad. Am I going to retire from this job? Am I going to be doing it that long? I don't know, maybe. I hope not. But it's one of those things. It's one of those kind of things, like, because I've thought about, you know, doing something else. But I'm like, what else could I be doing? What else would I do? What else would be better than this? I can think of things that would be better than the job I'm currently doing, but they would probably involve more stress for me. And so I'm kind of like, fuck it, I'll just stick with this. This really isn't that bad. That's a good point, Chris Morse. He says, I bet eventually prisoners will labor in landfills salvaging resources back. You're probably right. It's already happening to an extent, not just done with prisoners and not done in landfills, but if you do an eBay search for scrap gold, you'll find lots of listings for old broken CPUs. Because, you know, those were made with gold, and we still want gold, because for some reason it's money. Yeah, Chris Moore says that the music from the drawing selection screen was reminding him of playing Snake Rattle and Roll with Mom back in the day. I actually played Snake Rattle and Roll on my channel, if you want to go check that out. You can, just do a search for it, and it should be the only thing that comes up. But yeah, I live streamed it a while back. Very cool game, very fun. Certainly up there as far as cool NES games, in my opinion. Jay says, oh my god, these dinosaurs just get more derpy. I know. Grismore says, don't make excuses for people who are too lazy to use a trash can and a recycling bin. That's true. A lot of it does just come down to laziness. And I'll admit, I do recycle. I recycle the plastic shopping bags because it's easy. Like, I collect enough of those, and then eventually I take them and drop them in the bin in front of Walmart. I know I should be recycling more, and but I don't quite feel guilty enough yet. I think, though, if recycling was a lot easier to do, not that it's hard, but if it were like super simple to do, and you could explain it to a person how to do it in like a minute, and you could somehow broadcast that to everybody, and then give them the tools that they need to do it, then they would probably do it. Like, one of the things, some communities here in the United States have curbside recycling. They don't have it where I happen to live. I wish they did. But one of the major barriers to recycling is, you know, you got to take your stuff to the recycling center. And as simple and easy as that seems, that's more effort than some people are willing to put in. Whereas if they could just put out their recycling with the rest of their normal trash, and it just gets picked up, that right there is like a huge barrier gone. Like, I think if we just had curbside recycling in more communities, that would be like a huge impact right there. And this dinosaur is even more derpy. Lucas Water says, I'm going to bed. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Lucas Water, for tuning in. We'll see you on the next stream. Definitely didn't think that a live stream about Color a Dinosaur was going to get so deep and philosophical. Chris Moore says that his community has curbside recycling and has for over a decade. That's awesome. Says just got full can-sized bins and people still just throw cans in the trash. Well, those people are clearly assholes. Because that's an extra level of laziness. Let's puke all over the background here. And Jay says, I think the fact that this got so deep and philosophical is I think it's just casual enough that it encourages discussion. Yeah, it is actually. This game is kind of relaxing. Even though I'm making hideous things. That might be the most normal looking one I've done so far. Yeah, and Chris Morse makes an excellent point. He says, there's few enough people watching the stream that you can actually read the chat. I know, that's why I haven't bothered to tune into any of Cinemassacre's live streams. I just catch it on the recording later because their chat flies by a million miles an hour because they got 1 million viewers. And I typically stay away from the big streams like that for that reason. If it's just got like maybe a dozen people in it or so, I'm down with it. I do watch Boogie streams because I like his streams. They're crazy. But I don't try to chat in the chat on those streams because there's usually like 1,500 people watching. So it's another 1 million miles an hour thing going by. And I know that you as the host, you can change that. Like here on YouTube, you can set it to slow mode, which I think limits people to posting once every minute or so. But still, even if you turn that on and you've got 1,500 viewers and they're only posting once a minute, that's still 1,500 messages scrolling by every minute. Jay says, yeah, Jeremy, stay unpopular. Yes. I'm gonna punch out his guts. And it actually doesn't work. Huh. It makes him spotty. Chris Moore says, I've not tuned into live streams yet, so don't know what the usual conversation is like. You mean the usual conversation on my streams? Sometimes sort of like this. If there's more game to actually play, then I do more game and less talk and less thinking and usually more swearing. But as far as being like way super out of the ordinary, this isn't that out of the ordinary. Yeah. It just happened to make all those parts radioactive. Stomach, toenails, and spikes. But I think I'm actually going to end this particular recording Got a lot more mileage out of this game than I thought I would. For the people watching the live stream, stick around for a bit for the after show. But for the people watching on the recording, if you want to catch my next live stream, there's two ways you can be notified. You can either follow me on Twitter, because I send out a tweet just before I do a live stream, and you can find my Twitter link to my Twitter profile on my YouTube channel page, or you can subscribe to me here on YouTube and then just hit the bell thing and you'll get a notification whenever I start streaming on your favorite device. So, until the next live stream, which is going to be on Wednesday at about 9 to 10 p.m. Central Standard Time, because I do Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Don't know what it's going to be, because I never really know what it's going to be until just before I start. But until then, I'll see you.